Greetings, Joseph Kursky here, Geographer and Education Manager on the ESRI Education team. Welcome to Part 6 of Teaching Geography with ArcGIS Online. In our first 3 sessions, I made a case for how and why to use ArcGIS Online to teach geography. While we did have a few in-depth case studies and examples, really these first 3 sessions were reasons for using and illustrations of using ArcGIS Online to teach geography. The 4th session was more of an in-depth experience with looking at World Bank data, specifically age and population, growth rate, life expectancy, birth rate around the world. Part 5 was looking at demographic data in the UK specifically. In this 6th part, let's investigate how I might use ArcGIS Online to investigate a physical geography set of phenomena and issues, and that is plate tectonics, earthquakes, and volcanoes. So again, like the other parts in this session, we're going to start with ArcGIS.com or ArcGIS Online. This time, let's start a new map by clicking on the Map button. Let's hit the Add button here and search for layers. So I just clicked on Add, now I'm searching for layers. What I want is NOAA Historical Hazards. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has a data layer called Historical Natural Hazards, which is the 3rd one that shows up in the list. I'm going to go ahead and hit Add, then Done Adding Layers. And if I dig into the layers, I can see that not only do I have the plate boundaries, as you can see here, convergent, divergent, and transform, so I get a different symbology for these different things, but I also have a whole list of other data sets that I can add and analyze. One of those is the historical significant earthquakes. I'm going to turn that on right now, and then I'm going to pop up a map legend here. So one of the things that you can do right away is, well, tell me the patterns that you see. Notice also that we've got a seamless world. As we go around, and we'll get some delay here because it is pulling these earthquakes, thousands of earthquakes from the NOAA data server, but we do have a seamless way of going around and around the world. Interesting. Now look at the pattern. Right away we can see the relationship between plate boundaries and earthquakes. Okay, we also know that from this we've got a whole series of different magnitudes as well. Also, we can see that earthquakes are quite rare in Australia, but they're fairly common in New Zealand, right? Because of the location of the boundary between the Australian plate and the Pacific plate, which runs up through here, right through New Zealand. Okay, so there are many things that we could talk about. We could spend the next 15 minutes, but we don't have time to do that. But in your class, you could spend a significant amount of time looking and analyzing and asking questions about the pattern of earthquakes. So that's one of the things that we wanted to look at here inside ArcGIS Online. Of course, you can save this map and add to it with other data sets that you might want to add later on. First of all, I can see that in this data set, that we've also got volcanoes. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add some volcanoes, and I can see that they're going to be indicated as triangles. Now let's zoom into Southern Europe here. This is amazingly dense in terms of the number of earthquakes. You might ask your students, what area of the world is the densest as far as earthquakes in this particular data set? Now we always want to ask, where did the data come from? Right? So if we click on here, there is a description of all of the fields that are in this particular data set. So it's good to know, and it's good to ask, and it's good to question where the data comes from, and who created it, why it was created, and so on. So if we zoom in here to southern Europe, we will see some volcanoes as well as earthquakes. So we can see the relationship between earthquakes and volcanoes. So let's go ahead and make the volcanic eruptions enable the pop-up there. So I just went to the arrow and said enable pop-up. What the pop-up does is it allows us to go into the I part of GIS, the information behind the map, or behind the G, if you will. Alright, so if we look here, significant volcanic eruptions, 9 killed and 20 or 23 seriously injured, probably Sicily. Yes, it is Sicily, and it's probably Mount Etna. So if we zoom in there even more, we can get a sense for, yes, indeed it is. That's where it is. Okay, so the volcanic eruptions. And then we can kind of scroll through here, and we can see historical eruptions through time. Fascinating. Ranging all the way back to the 11th century. Wow. Okay, but what about volcano locations? Let's turn off significant eruptions right now and turn on volcanic locations. And let's pop up the legend to see what kind of okay, we're looking at that kind of a round symbol here. And so just to confirm my hypothesis that this was, we didn't turn on our pop-ups, so let's go ahead and do enable pop-ups. And then let's click on yes, Mount Etna. You got a latitude, longitude, and an elevation, what kind of volcano it is, and so on. Okay, so we've got a whole series of things that we can examine here. Let's go over to how about Iceland? We can go up here to the search window and then type in Iceland, and then here we've got Iceland. Okay, great. We can see, for example, that we've got several volcano locations throughout Iceland. We've also got some earthquakes here as well. So there's some relationship of earthquakes to volcanoes. We've also got this predominance of earthquakes near a plate boundary. So let's go ahead and scroll down here to Chile, and we can see an even more prominent, in this case, right, it's a subduction zone, so it's a subducting boundary here, or convergent as it's called right here in this legend. But we've got volcanoes and earthquakes all in proximity to the plate boundary. Now, one of the things we can do is we can measure a line or an area. So let's measure in kilometers approximately how far these volcanoes are to the plate boundary. It looks like 250 kilometers or so. So if we could look at this in 3D, which we can in different GIS tools, we would see the offset. The reason why is because the Nazca plate is subducting underneath the South American plate here, and at some point about 250 kilometers to the east of the actual superficial plate boundary is where you've got the Nazca plate to such a depth that it's affecting the magma and so on, and causing these volcanoes to form from lava coming to the surface at that point. So we've got some tools here that we can enhance our investigation with. And I've turned off my volcanoes and earthquakes and plate boundaries, and now I'm looking at eyewitness post-tsunami surveys. And so let's just take a look at a couple of these over here on the Hawaiian Islands, and take a look. Remember, we've got to pull up our enable pop-ups, and so let's go over here to Hilo and take a look at some of these surveys. Okay, so let's take a look. 1946, and there's going to be a lot from 1946 because that was a fairly significant tsunami event there. So fascinating, though. We can see that, yep, that was the April 1, 1946, and that is, here's another one from 1877. So anyway, the point is that we've got a vast array of interconnected data, right? We can have the students examine the relationship between plate boundaries and earthquakes, between earthquakes and volcanoes, between tsunamis and earthquakes, and also the terrain, right, near, let's just take a look one more time, looking at the terrain. You know, we can change the base map, so we can see here that this part of the coast is a bit steeper than down here, over here in this part of by Hilo, for example, a little flatter, but over here it's a little bit steeper, and we can change the base map, of course, to any kind of base map that we want, so we can really examine this in more detail and really getting quite close to where these tsunami events were reported and look at the land use in quite a bit of detail near each one of these. Excellent. Let's do one more thing now. Let's see about, okay, we've got a whole bunch of data here that we pulled over from the NOAA National Geophysical Data Center Historical Natural Hazards Database, but what about current earthquakes? Let's go back to earthquakes. What about current earthquakes, and how do they compare to these historically significant earthquakes of the past? That's my main question right now. So I'm going to go zooming out here to the planet. And okay, I can see my current earthquakes will probably be served up by the USGS. So let's go over here to a new tab, and in here, let's go to the earthquakes.usgs.gov site. On earthquakes.usgs.gov, we have an earthquakes link there. And here's the Get Real-Time Data area over here. So let's get over to Earthquake Feeds and Data. Okay, and on this page we can see a whole variety of things. What I would like to have is how about the last 30 days of significant earthquakes? There's a CSV file. It's just basically a text file of different earthquakes. Let's go back here and see, how about, you know what I'd like is a little bit more in terms of the number of earthquakes so I can see some patterns. So let's go with magnitude 4.5 and above and click on that CSV link. As you can see here, this is just a table. It's a comma-separated value text field or text file that has a latitude and a longitude here. So we should be able to map that. We should be able to copy that URL and then add data here in ArcGIS Online, and the GIS will say, oh, latitude and longitude, I can map that. Add layer from web, and it's a CSV, as you know, so we're going to paste our URL right here and add layer. Great. So now we see with just a few seconds of processing, we can see our earthquakes. These are the last 30 days of earthquakes, right? So if we say, gosh, let's configure the pop-up here. We want the pop-up to be last 30 days of earthquakes, and what do we want to have in our display? We don't really need the latitude, longitude. How about the magnitude and the depth? And that sounds good. Okay, that sounds good. Let's see here. We turn off everything except for magnitude and depth, and okay, all right, super. Save pop-up. Now, if we go ahead and click on one of these earthquakes, let's go ahead. It looks like there's one up here in the North Atlantic. This is interesting, probably on the spreading center, right? So here we've got a magnitude and a depth. You know what, though? I actually want to have the date on there. So let's go ahead and add the date and the time. Great. Now, if we, save pop-up, see what we're doing? We're configuring what we want to appear. Now we've got a date and a time. So this is May 15th, 12:45 a.m., probably Greenwich Mean Time or something like that. We can verify, but fascinating. So these are all in the last 30 days. Now, what about this? In our NOAA data set, we do have the plate boundaries. So let's go ahead and turn those on, those plate boundaries, and then let's change our base map to, how about a light gray canvas, so we don't see a whole lot of detail underneath and we can really pick out these earthquakes. Super. So let's turn that on, and let's turn off the historical earthquakes for the moment, but just see the plate boundaries and the last 30 days of earthquakes now. All right, super. Wow. Okay, so what does that show us? The historical earthquakes are to right here. How does that compare to the last 30 days of earthquakes? Does it match the pattern? Does it not match the pattern? So far, just a cursory look looks like it matches the pattern sort of fairly well, although there are some earthquakes in the last 30 days. For example, this one right here, which looks like in the state of Louisiana, that is actually not too common in historical times. So that's an anomaly. There's a lot of others, though, for example, in the Aleutians and over here in East Asia, that are historically significant for earthquakes and they've also had earthquakes in the last 30 days. Okay, so once again, let's say we really want to investigate these close up front and center. So I'm kind of curious about this one now. It turns out it's in Texas and not in Louisiana. So let's change our base map down to the Bing Maps aerial here, and let's really zoom in quite tightly on this particular. Okay, interesting. Here's a town. Here's that earthquake epicenter, and that occurred about 5 days ago. What is this town? It's let's go ahead and click on topographic. That's at Timpson, Texas. Okay, interesting. So the point is, we can do that for anywhere, right? We can go to Japan, figure out where these particular earthquakes have occurred, not just historically, but in the last 30 days. So that's the kind of thing that we can do. Here's one that's in the last 30 days, right over here. That's the kind of thing we can do to enhance our understanding, in this case, of plate tectonics and earthquakes and volcanoes. And also what we did at the end there was we added in some historical data, and we added in the last 30 days of magnitude 4.5 earthquakes and above. Again, we're using ArcGIS Online as our inquiry-based toolkit in conjunction with asking deep and rich questions about data. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that piques your interest, that it is quite easy to be able to do this not only with one computer and a projector in a classroom, but also if the students are actually in a computer lab, or if they bring their own tablets, tablet computers or laptops, they could totally be doing this along with you leading the way, or with you posing questions and having them doing independent investigations. Thanks.